Hello, I'm Lee Thielen with the League of Women Voters of Larimer County. Welcome to CrossCurrents, which is brought to you by the City of Fort Collins with support of the League of Women Voters of Larimer County. Tonight we have a panel to discuss ballot issue number 1, which will be on the ballot April 7th. That initiative will be to continue the expiring 0.25% sales and use tax that has supported building on basics. This is a tax that has supported community capital improvement program, capital projects, and maintenance. We call the program tonight, Building on Basics, Is It Necessary? I'd like to present our panelists for the evening. First, we have Glen Colton, a community leader. Welcome, Glen.
Good evening.
Linda Hopkins, a community volunteer.
Thank you.
Jerry Gavaldon, real estate professional and lifelong resident.
Good evening.
And we have the mayor of the city of Fort Collins, Karen Weitkunat.
Good evening, Fort Collins.
All of the panelists have studied this issue and will have much to add to the discussion this evening, which will be done very much as a dialogue where we share ideas. The question on the ballot on April 7th is whether to continue this expiring tax, which again is 25 cents on each $100 purchase, for the purpose of funding Building the Basics capital projects. This would be extended for the next 10 years. The revenue will be used for both projects and maintenance and operations. The City Council has identified numerous projects that will be funded through this revenue, which range from improved bicycle routes to improvement of a number of the city's assets. We have questions prepared, but we will also request questions from the audience. So our audience members who braved this cold night to come out for this exciting topic, we're most appreciative. Please have your questions in your mind or written down and ready to go. After we have sort of opened the discussion, we will have a microphone going around to you to take your questions for the panel. So we'll first start with some prepared questions. And the first question, would someone like to explain the issue more fully? Madam Mayor, since this was referred from the City Council, could you take this question?
Sure.
Could you start by referring to what this revenue source has accomplished in the past and how you see it going forward for another 10 years?
What is on the ballot is ballot issue number 1 that is dealing with a quarter-cent continuation of a capital improvement tax. Following up, it's being called Bob 2, Building on Basics 2, following up on the previous capital improvement projects that were labeled Bob. This is a continuation that has been occurring through a historical sequence throughout the city. Since 1973, we have been utilizing a capital program, a separate taxing in order to bring additional amenities to the community that cannot be provided through the normal channels of the budget. And it's an enhancement. The interesting thing is we take it to the people, and it's the people who will decide whether or not these projects go forward. And this is how we build on the community. And as you said, there's a variety of projects that go with it. It is what has brought you. If you look around the community, this quarter cent through the years has brought you the Lincoln Center, the Senior Center, the Museum of Discovery, Epic, and Mulberry Pool, just to name a few of the things. So you can see what the people have asked we would like in addition to what you can provide through the budget, and it's done through this means. And I'm proud to say that in that we have brought that in, followed exactly what the people have said through the voting, and produced these products on time, generally under budget, and exactly spending the dollars as indicated through the ballot measure.
Thank you. Thank you. Would someone like to address what some of the key projects are to be funded under?
I would like to comment on the mayor's point and some of my own views as a lifelong resident of Fort Collins.
All right.
As it has been shared, Senior Center, we have one. It benefits the whole community because it's available to everybody, even though it's called the Senior Center. Lincoln Center, we have one. The Mulberry Pool, the museum, we have one. Epic, we have one. if you look at what we've done in the past, these have benefited our entire community. Now, let's look at the elements going forward. Some of these elements don't not benefit the entire community. A toy train, for example, is a toy train. Southeast Rec Center is not benefiting the entire community because it's going to benefit mainly the segmented part, which even though it's available to everybody, however, who's going to go to that area? And then some of the Lincoln Street improvements, it was taken off, the bridge put in. Is everybody going to benefit from that bridge? Though it was number 20th on the list as deficient of all bridges. Some say it's 9, but it's only obsolete by design and the changes in city bridge designs. So I'm saying is going forward, we may have detracted away from the benefits of all or most of the community. That's why I'm asking the questions and my position.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Linda, would you like to talk about some of the key projects to be funded and how these were determined?
Well, I think it's good to reflect, for those thinking about how they'll vote and for the listeners, it's good to reflect on the process that this list went through in its selection and prioritization. It's, while we're reading about it in the newspaper at the moment and listening to it at the moment, it is in fact a 2-year process at least that the voters, citizens have been discussing a very long list. There was a website access where you could go on, check your favorite projects with no holds barred on the money, just these are my favorite projects. So that tends to start putting in the community's input. Then it became more focused. It also reflects the land use plans, the bicycle master plan, the street master plan. We're fortunate that Fort Collins doesn't set these plans on the shelf, but gets them down regularly, takes from those plans priorities, adds those to the list. So while there may not be a project that is everyone's favorite, I think there are projects that do benefit everybody.
Glenn?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on the fact that this is not the only source of funds for capital projects within the city of Fort Collins. In fact, we have impact fees, which we collect to do things like road improvements, to fund public facilities, to build community parks, and other public facilities around the town. And it's meant to have new growth pay for those facilities that are required to meet that new growth. And there's at least 3 or 4 projects on here that I think really should be paid for through impact fees. One is the arterial street intersection improvements. Several years ago, actually, a proposal was brought to City Council to expand our street oversizing fee to pay for arterial improvements. Now, the City Council, due to the fact that new growth moving in does impact existing arterials as well as just new ones. And it was not adopted by City Council. So now they're coming to ask voters for, I think it was $8 million to do those intersection improvements, and they should have been funded by impact fees. The Southeast Community Center is another example of one that probably should have been funded that way. If we are deciding that we want to have a community center in every section of the community, and Mountain Vista will be next, we should be collecting impact fees on the new development to pay for those things instead of going to existing residents to pay for it. Another source of funds is the DDA and the Downtown Development Authority through their tax increment financing. Now, there's been a lot of money raised through tax increment financing for the Downtown Development Authority, and most of it has gone to individual businesses over the years for improvements to facades and things like that. And I strongly believe that that was intended to go to general infrastructure improvements, such as we're now seeing on Lincoln, which is within the DDA, Willow, and the Linden Street improvements. All of those are things that more appropriately probably should have been funded through DDA tax increment financing instead of having the money go to individual businesses. And if not, we should be looking at special improvement districts for some of these areas where we don't have money, instead of coming to the voters to raise our general sales tax to do things that benefit specific parts of town or specific businesses that will benefit from Willow Street improvements and things like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could we talk a little bit more about some of these projects, what the projects are, and also, are they in any priority order? There's a long list. Is there a priority to them, or are they all of the same value?
The sequence, if you're saying priority meaning sequence, the sequence has not been set. And that will be part of a pay-as-you-go philosophy that the city has. So the priorities have been established through this process of public input and council master planning. They include, I think, some of the things that obviously you've alluded to, but the bike improvements throughout town, pedestrian and sidewalk improvements, Poudre River cleanup and some enhancements to the river, including a whitewater park, recreation area. Bike and pedestrian underpasses, I think, benefit many people. The Southeast Community Center obviously is located in one part of town, similar to the Atzlan Center in another part of town. There's a fund for affordable housing. So it's a broad list of projects. Club Tico, City Park Train, Linden Street, Willow Street, improvements that I believe enhance the downtown, a nature in the city program, and I don't want to neglect what I think is an important project, which is improving and enhancing the gardens at Spring Creek.
In that profile, for the public, there's 17 items in the package, and it's a mix of projects. It's not only just your standalone projects, such as buildings and such, but it's also incremental funds that would be meeting the needs, bicycle facilities, sidewalks, and filling in that, some of the upgrades to that. So it includes those pieces. 6 of those items are in the ballot package are funds, to spend funds on an annual basis for projects like the sidewalks. Some of the other projects are private and will require private capital to be addressed with it. For example, we've talked about the Poudre River Whitewater Recreation Area. Those are looking for additional funds. So when it comes to building projects that are there or addressing them, a lot of the timing will depend upon public participation. It will depend on grants, which are other pieces that can come in to play, and where they fall. Fort Collins has a process of being billed when the dollars are there. So something that requires a lot of money, and we saw that with the senior center. It was one of the last things that was built with the Bob project because the dollars took that long to generate.
And
so
raise.
10 years of a tax, it's impossible to believe that a rec center would be built in the first 2 years because there's some contingencies that go with that. So it's looking at these projects. The priority comes, first of all, on where funds can be available. And again, I would like to say that the list of projects, most of them stem from master plans in the city. It's from projects that have been, I believe we have over 70 policies and plans within the city. And that's where these are gleaned from. And then the public input and the need for additional dollars, because there's not enough money in the general fund to be able to do that.
I would like to add some flavor and some dimension to some of these projects, if I may. Let's look at the City Park train. I know it's only a $350,000 item. I have some friends on Facebook who commented that they could do repair and have the train running for $50,000. However, city staff has says we're going to go $350 because we want to do more to the train, and that's quoted by the group that's promoting the train. Look, there's nothing against a train. I rode it when I was a child. I enjoyed it. However, this does not belong in Bob. There's other ways to fund the train. Private grants, the railroad can contribute to it. Other features can contribute to it. Let's look at the Carnegie Center. Carnegie Center, yes, there's a lot of merit to it. However, there's issues to it. One item was brought up by Councilman Overbeck asking about the details. There's a lot of details missing in this package. And I'm very concerned about that because one item that came up, and Bob Overbeck's comment was from staff, was $70,000 for tables and chairs for a building. And I believe in details to understand before I decide to make a purchase. I want to know what's in this stuff so we can make an adequate decision as a community. Are these viable projects worthy of being funded through an additional tax, or are there other sources of revenue? And can we go as pay-as-you-go? I know this is a 10-year tax, but it's more than it's more than pay-as-you-go. It's another influx of money coming in to pay for these projects, and I'm very concerned about it because there's a lot of lacking of detail. I've asked for detail. They cannot provide it in a reasonable manner, and even the city manager says, Jerry, we cannot give you the detail you want. And that's something that really makes me think about this whole package. We don't have enough information to understand what the costs are going to be. It's like buying a house or a car. I'm not going to sign I'm not going to sign for something that I don't know what I'm paying for and what I'm getting. And that's what we need to. If they're a priority, there's other resources, oversizing fees, other funding mechanisms. We don't need this tax at this time for these projects because we can do something else with them along the way as pay-as-you-go.
You know, I think we need to be clear, particularly for the listeners and people viewing in the viewing audience. This is not a new tax. It's not an additional tax. It is a tax that we have had for 30 years. And in my mind, we have had the opportunity in each iteration to, as voters, look at the list, create the list, and then vote for the list. I will admit to going back to the Designing Tomorrow Today list, having worked on that campaign and been a part of that vote, which the items on that do take years sometimes to develop exactly what should go into the Lincoln Center. I'd also say on some of the street projects, historically, the LeMay Avenue Bridge, the Timberline Bridge, the bridge on Prospect across to Summit View, those have been capital improvement taxes that we've all voted on. So this is a decision opportunity for voters to say, yes, I want to continue to invest in the projects. I'd also challenge, Glenn, the notion of street oversizing is collected on every project, on every home. Whether it's adequate is up for debate, perhaps, but the fact that those fees in many cases have been collected and are simply waiting to be invested in some of these streets, specifically Lincoln. Also, when you think through LeMay, the developer on each side was the city of Fort Collins. If you think of Timberline Road as it was improved from Prospect to Mulberry, it's open space on either side. We, in fact, are the developers of some of those roads. Prospect, again, through Riverbend Park. Oversizing street fees from adjacent developers were the citizens, I believe. And I think the projects that we create are very important to invest and reinvest.
Having been on Planning and Zoning Board for a number of years, we talked a lot about impact fees. And frankly, they haven't been increased as costs have gone up recently. They haven't been expanded to cover things like the impact on existing intersections. And we don't have money in that fund. Otherwise, we could be paying for these things instead of coming back to the voters. So I think the city government has been negligent in not raising the fees to the level that they should be to take care of the cost of the new growth that is so hot in this city right now. We're growing so fast, and we don't have the money to keep up with it, but we're coming back and asking the general taxpayers to help fund some of those things, and that's just unfair to taxpayers.
Are there projects that you would have liked to have seen on this list that were not there?
Well, one thing that certainly should have got some more discussion is probably dealing with real trains instead of toy trains.
Yeah, that's one of my questions.
And I have not personally looked at that closely, but that would be a big deal project that could really benefit everyone. Another thing is we have this climate action plan coming up soon that council will be voting on. It's going to have some costs involved with it, but we're going ahead with this before we decide, does the city need to put any money into that? And just another, to give a broader perspective on this whole thing, yeah, building on basics has been around for a long time. And by the way, I've supported most of those, and I supported the Keep Fort Collins Great ballot initiative, wrote a soapbox on that. But the economic conditions in Fort Collins are vastly changed. First of all, we did pass Keep Fort Collins Great 0.85% sales tax, and that has helped our revenue situation tremendously. Plus, we have a very hot economy, and in fact, the city sales and use tax that was collected last year, 2014, is $18 million over budget. And at the same time, we've given $100 million of tax subsidies to big corporations and developers with the intent that we were going to get a financial return on those things. And the mall hasn't even opened yet, and yet we have all this excess tax revenue. Why aren't we taking that excess tax revenue and putting it towards these things, a big chunk of it, instead of coming back to the voters? I don't think we need this. We need to look at these other sources, make sure that the right things are being paid for through the right sources, and that we start utilizing some of these tax collection overruns to benefit the entire community and give the citizens of Fort Collins a tax break.
Would anyone like to respond to Glenn?
You know, we need to start with the basic premise of how the city operates. You know, we have an extremely high-performing city government, and we do our business openly, honestly, and with an incredible amount of public involvement and engagement in the decisions that we made. So there's high level of transparency. We operated a $500 million budget this year. It can't pay for everything. You know, as the city has grown and the issues that you bring up, that budget covers the costs that are the services for the city. It does take into our police department, our fire department, all the things that are essential to creating a city. What has happened with the quarter-cent capital improvement tax is it is a method that has come from the grassroots, and I'll go back to that, of the people in the community saying, we want these things above and beyond the services that you're giving us as a city. We want a performing arts center. We want a swimming pool. We want, and we're willing to pay for it. That's a premise we should be looking at. What are the people willing to pay for? And from this list and what the city has said as a planning process, we have developed a set of things through the years, and these are continuations. It took the senior center 2 ballot measures to be ordered in order to be built and to be improved, and it may very well have another one. But it's you, the people, that are deciding this, and it's above and beyond what the city can deliver. So when you start talking about projects and the lovely railroad project, boy, did we talk about that, and was that wanted? We did want that to be a piece. As most of you may know, we have 3 different railroads going through the community that service us. The Great Western Railway, we have UP, Union Pacific, and the Burlington Northern Santa Fe. They're all utilizing the tracks. They do their switching, on Vine and on Riverside. And that switching takes the Great Northern, Colorado Great Western Railway, switches the cars and services our industries, Anheuser-Busch, Vestas, going back and forth through it. So when we start talking about changes, which, by the way, folks, there is money in the budget that we will be looking at the switching yards and doing a study to try and figure out what can we do about the trains, Glenn. But in the conversations, we're talking some real money here, and the overpass over the railroad tracks was strongly considered for a price tag of $26 to $27 million, upwards to $40 million. That is the whole project. So council will be looking at that in the future. How do we fund this? And again, it would be asking the people, how important is this? And it can't fit into the regular budget because, as you saw, we have sidewalk needs that are up to $52 million, and there isn't enough money to do everything. So it's a process that the city undertakes, and it's how we do business.
Linda Vroman, Fort Collins. How do you address citizens' concerns that Bob 2 funds could be redirected to pay the city's expenses related to the proposed on-campus stadium?
It can't.
Well, let's do both of you, so go ahead.
You know, that's a very good question, is because I wore a number of hats. I did work for CSU running the concessions in the 70s and 80s, and I watched them build Hughes Stadium. I used to sell Cokes over in Colorado Field. So I can speak to this from a number of vantages of what I have been involved with. And I'm concerned about Bob we passed Bob, and then CSU is going to come and ask us to pay for some infrastructure stuff that we have to take care of. There should be a cliche with the school district. We build the schools, the city builds the roads. That's always been told to us as a lifelong resident. CSU can do the same thing. I know there's some agreements going on, it's going to go back and forth, but the stadium, and this is my personal view only and my experience, the stadium is going to cause a heavy burden on all our streets and surrounding areas. I live off Stewart on the May. I can just walk to the stadium instead of drive because there'll be no place to park. But there's going to be infrastructure costs that is going to impact the city, and we're going to have other forces of costs from the stadium, and intangible and direct costs, indirect costs. All those are going to be something that's going to be factored in, and I'm afraid we're going to be paying the bill. And if that's going to redirect funds from it, that's going to be the citizens to city council through elections, talking to our council members saying, what are we going to do to cover this? Because if CSU builds a stadium, we have to do something to support it because we're going to have gridlock in our city.
Well, let's let the mayor respond to it.
Yeah. Needless to say, the ballot language is under very strict rules and regulations that not only come legally and otherwise in order to follow through on the projects that are there. That money cannot go anywhere else. And it's not, if you look at the ballot language, it's strictly for these projects, and it probably will take all the dollars, but there's no way it can be directed elsewhere. If you look at past projects, you'll see that every cent was spent on the projects that were placed before the voters, and nothing was diverted.
Thank you. First of all, I just, with all due respect, Mayor, I think that this Bob 2 was not grassroots driven. It was brought by staff, and a lot of the projects still on there are staff driven. But I want to address the stadium thing, and I agree with the mayor that if Bob was passed, the money from Bob couldn't go towards the stadium, but it would allow some of those other sales tax overages that we have collected to be dedicated to the stadium if council so choose. Just like the council has chosen to take $5 million out of the general fund overage to fund the Lincoln Avenue improvements that were taken out of this ballot issue, only to be replaced by $5 million of bridge improvements. So council has a lot of discretion on how to do money, and if we give them a pot of money for Bob to cover some of these other things, they could, in their discretion, take money to fund those stadium improvements.
Well, I think what Glen's saying is if we choose not to improve or approve Bob, that puts a leash on council. And I don't think that's not the question. We're not tying CSU and the decisions that the state of Colorado makes to the decisions that the citizens of Fort Collins make about investing in their projects. This is a very long public process. To say that it is staff-driven ignores all of the public, you can't ignore all the public input that came down to this list. I think the list is very value-driven. It's driven by our community values. We talk about things like the ADA compliance. That is very important. It's not driven by growth. It's driven by how we want to build a community. And I think incremental steps in improving bike paths, sidewalks, ADA compliance, all of those add up to a quality of community that's just frankly undeniable.
Thank you for coming out on a cold night. I'm Gary Thomas. I live here in the city. If we think about the Northside Atsalon Center, the Senior Center, Mulberry Pool, Epic Pool, the City Park Pool, every one of those facilities is north of Drake. Yet, demographically, Drake is the middle of the city. Why shouldn't we build something on the south end for the people and taxpayers that live down there?
Would like to address that?
If you look at how our city is growing, it's growing south. And if you look at those infrastructure items that you mentioned, Mr. Thomas, they were built in the 70s and 80s. Up to the 80s, Harmony was a 4-lane road, but it had 0 rooftops over in that area. It slowly has grown, and you're right, it has grown, and there's other opportunities. There's special improvement districts that can help pay for some of those items out there, and it could be other items other revenue sources through property, the developers' fees could be helped to contribute towards a park fees that we have to pay for. It goes back to a comment made earlier. Our oversizing fees and our fees for parks and arts and public places are, in many ways, and for these facilities, are woefully behind. An example is in situ came in 2000. They paid their oversizing fee in 2000 for Lincoln, and now they're talking about bringing Lincoln. That's 15 years of waiting for something to be built. Southside could be addressed in a different way, and maybe if Bob does not pass, maybe go back to the drawing board and really look at things that could be done across our community that benefits our community.
Would you like to refer to public input related to that facility, the community center?
I'm not sure of the specific public input to the community center. It's obviously a growing part of our community, but I'd also say it's a community demographics that don't always participate actively. When you think of the area south of Trilby, there are subsidized apartments. There's a mobile home park, there's a low-income housing project, there's specifically a care housing project. Those are citizens in Fort Collins that I believe it's their turn, and as a voter, I'm willing to support that.
It goes back again, and the grassroots for me starts way back. It starts with the plan that says, first of all, we're going to build a rec center in the southern part of the city. That was part of a plan, and it's been on the drawing board since the days of city plan. So the people on that end have risen and said, the time is now, and let's get it on this project. That to me is somewhat following with the grassroots. We talk about bicycle infrastructure improvements and the over-underpasses that will go with the bicycle trails. Again, that came from the people. That's things that the citizens have said, hey, we really want these things, and we're willing to pay for them. When we do the Kaya Park and the water Putter River enhancements, again, it's citizens that have taken the high road and said, these are things that would enhance our community, and we're willing to put our dollars into it and our time as well. So from that perspective, I think it is grassroots. But by the same token, to answer Gary's question, everything comes with its own time. I love being able to compare what happened on North College and how long it took to get anything going there. That was 100 years of history with the city and nothing happened, and it took the last few initiatives, of which Bob was one of them, that helped to contribute to helping North College, the Northside Atsalon Center, all happened for the northern part of the city, which had nothing previous either. So in due time, I think there are those that have looked at Harmony Road and the enhancements there, many of which will be coming in the next projects as the south maybe comes of age again. So it's in time, and I believe the time is now with the ballot language and moving forward on the project.
I live in the south side of town, and frankly, the vast majority of the projects on this, once again, benefit the north side of town. And like I said, if we really want a community center, and we want to have them in every region, we should be having impact fees. And council should go back and say, we want to collect impact fees on all new houses to pay for these things, instead of going back to all the voters. And I think, what is a creative center? I mean, I'm not sure that people really ask for a creative center with all these weird, I mean, it's a little bit of a bling type thing. It's something that, where is this coming from, and who's it really going to benefit? And yeah, there are some parts over there that are low income, but it's also one of the actually richest parts of our town, the southeast part of town. And there's a lot of health club opportunities there, and an outdoor pool with slides and a little water thing. You know, that could be more of a private industry thing to do, instead of having the taxpayers fund that. So I think that project is of questionable value compared to some other things like the train and others that we could be working on.
We have a few more prepared questions, so we'll move to those. Some of this revenue is to go to maintenance and operation. Do we know how much of it goes to maintenance and operation versus just capital?
The operation and maintenance part is a small portion. I think I'm going to guess around $4 to $5 million. But basically, it is for those projects that require additional operation maintenance, which are, when you go down this list, are frankly very few. A sidewalk doesn't take additional operation. It's added to the maintenance. So the increment where it's folded into the budget, that there's a 5-year plan to then fold that into the, as you said, increasing sales tax. So our budget is sales tax. We have one of the lowest sales tax, and I think, again, a small portion of this tax going to operation and maintenance for a small time frame is warranted.
Well, how were the concept of 10 years determined? Was that just a discussion by the council?
It relates partly to the cost of projects. You know, we started with a list of $400 million in projects. A quarter-cent sales tax generates $7 to $8 million a year. So if we look at 10 years, that's roughly $80 million. And utilizing that amount of money, we were able to look at the projects and listing 17 projects that equal that amount. You know, it's kind of a reverse process. Here's what it will generate. Here's what you can do. And as I said, like when we were looking at the railroad and saying, well, here's $30 million for the railroad, that kind of drops your package down. So starting with that, working backwards, and then it was desired that we put the operation and maintenance, the O&M, on the projects that would require it for 5 years. So that dropped it another $5 million from what we generated. So we actually have, I think it's $73.5 million of actual dollars that could fit into the projects, and that's how we backed things out and put things in from the list that was there.
Has anyone looked at the multiplier effect of what impact this has on our economy when you spend $80 million? Has the staff given any numbers on that? In other words, that money is new, those are jobs in the community, and businesses in the community have new construction and so
At this
forth.
point in time, no, that was not part of the factoring, but I know we factored in 2.8% in inflation, and there's contingency funds on the projects because we know things where we are today don't maintain those numbers. But Let me tell you, the city is excellent at estimating the costs that go into projects, and we are very close.
If I may, that's one of my items I've been asking city staff for, the details. What's it going into? And I'm going to go back to Councilman Overbeck asked for a detail as a test on the Carnegie Building. He got the information, but it was a arduous job for staff to put together. I asked staff for more information about O&M, repair and maintenance. I asked about the details, what goes into a project. Though they have experience, though they know they have built bridges, they have built things before, but for someone to make a decision, we should be able to know what's going on, and they have not been able to supply it. As Jenny Sawyer wrote, and I put this in soapbox and for the Coloradan, and she says they don't have that. They are underfunded. They said they'll work on master plans. They pull them from other projects and comparables. And when the ballot measure is approved, if it is, then the details will follow. That concerns me. I'd like to know more so I can make an informed vote. Darren Atterbury, after a council meeting, said, Jerry, we're trying to get you information, but we can't give you the details. You know, when staff or anyone cannot say what it's going to cost, but they want you to vote on faith, on 80 million, pulling the numbers out. I like to stand and look at these numbers and say, yes, it's a good project, I'm willing to vote, but I don't have it.
Thank you. We have a question from the audience. I think we have two questions from the audience.
My name is Diane Jones. I'd like the panel to comment that in a lot of other cities, they do capital projects that are folded into their general fund budgets, and frankly, aren't able to build the kinds of projects that we enjoy in Fort Collins. But in Fort Collins, because of the way in which we've done capital programming and projects, voters every few years have that opportunity to look at the projects, look at the master plans, and make a selection. I'd like the panel to comment about how that either helps folks know what we're going to be getting, and how they have then the ability to influence what goes on the ballot.
When I was a student at Lincoln and Pooter, I remember Designing Today Tomorrow. Our class was given the first parts of the Designing Today. To me, I was excited because those projects benefited, and we had input in as early as seventh and, as kids. And that was important. It's carried over well, and it may have served its purposes very well in the past, and I'm encouraging on that. But looking at where we are today, I don't know if everyone's giving their input, if it's been weighted properly and analyzed to what makes the list to be under the 80 million. So, and you just cannot just say, here's a time and period, no more inputs. This is a continuous process. This is what makes government transparent, makes government know the people and by the people, as a cliche. We should be able to make inputs continuously, and I supported Bob in the past, but this one I can't.
As I mentioned earlier, we're at a unique stage in Fort Collins' financial status. Back in 2010, we were in danger of not being able to fund our basics. And residents overwhelmingly approved a 0.85% tax increase to fund those things. And that's a lot of money. We're in a different place today. As I mentioned, we have a red-hot economy growing everywhere. $18 million over budget in sales and use tax collections. We should be taking some of that money and putting that to capital improvements now. Maybe in the past, when we didn't have a 0.85% Keep Fort Collins Great tax, we didn't have the luxury of doing that. We do now. Either that or we should reduce the Keep Fort Collins Great tax. But either way, those funds should be going to pay for some of this, as well as I mentioned earlier, the appropriate other sources should be used to do a lot of these things. DDA, tax increment financing, impact fees, special improvement districts, having those who benefit the most pay instead of having a general tax that frankly hits the poorest people the hardest.
Yeah, I think part of the question was other communities don't have this kind of Bob. And so what might be the advantages or differences?
Part of the question, I think, from the audience is that rather than have a base sales tax, Fort Collins is one of the lower base sales tax and lower total tax in the entire region. Other communities have higher taxes, wrap these projects routinely in their budget, and they have tax rates in excess of 8%. It's sort of invisible to the resident. Things get done, things get decided, but there's not the investment. And I think that is the word I'd like to use, that citizens look at these lists, participate in a long process, and then opt to make an investment, and in this case, frankly, a reinvestment. We're not raising the tax. I was at a meeting earlier this week where one of the folks in the audience asked if it was a new tax, and the answer was no, don't change your cash register. It's the same tax. We get to pick the projects for this tax.
Thank you. We have two more questions at least. I know there's a lady over here and one over here.
Good evening. I'm Amy Alcorn. And I understand that this tax will cost an average family of four about $39 a year. Can you confirm that? Is that roughly correct?
Yes, I believe so. You're talking 1/4 of 1 cent on a purchase. And that is, for the average family, if you take that 1/4 cent, it is approximately $39. You affirmed.
Another question there and the one over here.
Hi, Gary Thomas again. I've seen a chart, but I don't remember the exact number. Where is the tax rate of Fort Collins compared with other cities in our vicinity?
I have.
Seeing that the claim was that we have the lowest rate, I looked it up, and we used to, but once we did the 0.85% Keep Fort Collins Great, that raised us up to a level at least as high or maybe higher than anyone, except for those that have a dedicated RTA tax with a greatly expanded type of transportation system over in what we have. I looked at several different cities, Broomfield, I don't know. I don't want to go through them all, but I think someone should get those facts out and really show if we're going to be claiming that our tax is among the lowest in the region.
Well, I can answer that. Fort Collins tax is 7.4, Loveland is 6.55, Thornton, Broomfield are in the exceed 8, and the highest, I think, again, probably relating to the RTA is Boulder at 8.8. So 7.4, and the discussion then is really whether we keep it at that rate and continue to invest.
I looked online, I thought I saw 7.85, is that not?
I got that from the city, I'm sure.
Okay,
Okay.
We'll go on. I think there was a question over here. Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor.
I just wanted
Maybe.
When we start looking at taxes, don't forget there's add-on taxes that go with that. The basic rate for Fort Collins is actually the, 2.25? And then just the basic, but then we added on, the natural areas tax. We added on a separate Keep Fort Collins. They're all temporary. There's only a small degree of permanent tax that's part of our budget cycle that we can count on, which is how we do business and how all this came to be with the extra 1/4 cents for amenities and add-ons. So,
Thank you. Thank you. We have a question here in the audience.
In the interest of time, because I know you're running short, I'm Sue Ellen Charlton. I don't live in the city. I live about 100 yards outside the city, but probably spend 90% of my discretionary budget shopping in the city. So I won't vote on it. I can only lobby my friends. Would you please, as time permits, go back to the whole issue of sequencing and priority? And I'm going to give you the example in the publicity of strengthening the city's commitment to affordable housing. How do you handle that? You can't do it all at once. I understand that point. And I understand that certain things are way too expensive. to perhaps even include in the plan in Bob. But something like the senior center couldn't get done all at once. So there has to be some priority and sequencing, and I didn't quite understand how that process works.
Is your question about sequencing in general or specifically
In
about
terms
the
of all of these
affordable housing?
projects, you can't complete them all at once. So
You can,
in terms of the decision-making, how does that work?
yeah. Right. We touched on that a little earlier, but maybe not in great detail. Who would like to answer that? Madam Mayor, would you like to answer
Well,
that? Or Linda?
And then maybe the mayor has more specifics, but in the pay-as-you-go philosophy, some projects can be funded quicker, the ones that perhaps cost less. Some projects would take a considerable amount of design time. Other projects have private investment, where, as in the senior center case, we raised $500,000 to contribute. That took quite a while, frankly, and the design takes a while. I think this community-centered design takes a while. The affordable housing is a fund which can perhaps pay some of the development fees, pay and guide some projects, and put them maybe ahead of other projects. So it's a fund. It's not a designated item at this point.
I'm Jean Ewell, and I live in Fort Collins and have all my life. I would like to comment that this dialogue is really very refreshing. It seems like dialogues are a little hard to come by, so I've appreciated everybody's questions and thoughts that have been shared. And I have a lot of notes scribbled. I'll see if I can put this together into something meaningful. Although I'm pleased and have no problem with taxation for the benefit of the community, and am appreciative of the fine projects and improvements accomplished by those and those being proposed, is there a way and a surety? And I'm really asking this for myself and a lot of people that I'm connected with in town, that none of these tax dollars will be spent or directed towards projects in any way associated with the proposed CSU Stadium. And there is a lot of skepticism. I know we kind of had this asked once, but if there are some assurances or some ways, I'd appreciate it.
Answered that question. Unless there's anything we wanted to add, we do just coming down to closing statements here. Unless there's something anyone wanted to add, I think the answer was that it couldn't happen legally. Is that correct?
It can't.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
But money could be dedicated from other sources if it's available.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. We're reaching a point in our evening where I would like to give each of our four wonderful panelists an opportunity to do a closing statement. But I have one question as a bicyclist that I have to ask first. What will this mean for the bicyclists?
It will mean wonderful new improvements to our trails. It's working on working underpasses and overpasses on the bike trail. It's the improvement that may come through College to Shields. We have a couple of underpass, crossing major streets is a major issue. And on the board is Trilby, Shields, and there's 12 different areas that the bicycles will help to cross the major arterials. So that's part of the process. And again, it's design, it's development that goes with it, and the timing that will fit to the development.
Thank you. I'd like to now give you each a closing statement opportunity. Would you like to start, Glenn?
Sure. I'll put on my glasses so I can actually read.
Sure.
Fort Collins citizens should vote against the Bob 2 ballot initiative in April. The city is flush with cash from a red-hot economy, and we've also given $100 million worth of taxpayer subsidies to big corporations and developers over the last few years, and our sales tax revenue and use tax were $18 million over this last year. And that money some of that money can be rededicated to purposes like this. And it's only fair that taxpayers vote themselves a tax break by voting against Bob 2. It's also time the city get its fiscal house in order, needs to re-examine its capital funding mechanisms to ensure that the costs of new or revitalized infrastructure is paid for by those that benefit the most, not through a general sales tax. Impact fees have not been adjusted for many years. The DDA has given away money to individual business owners when it should be going to fund infrastructure improvements like those on this list in the downtown area. And so given the red-hot economy with Keep Fort Collins Great in place and the new mall coming online this fall, which should generate more sales tax revenue, right? We no longer need the Bob tax. Projects such as those on this list, if deemed important, can and should be funded by general sales tax revenues, impact fees, special improvement districts, and tax increment financing.
Thank you, Glenn. We're going to cut you off.
Thank you.
Linda?
I'd simply say, as a volunteer and a long-term resident in Fort Collins, I'm confident in the system that's been established. I'm confident in the public process. I'm confident in the restrictions. That money is used specifically for what's designated. And frankly, I'm proud to support it and encourage voters to continue to reinvest.
Your turn, Jerry. 1 minute, please.
Okay. I'm concerned about Bob because if you have doubts on something, you need to vote no. Bob has a lot of doubts, and the doubts are the projects on him. There's a lot of good projects, and there's projects that need to be reviewed and probably extracted, and probably a new ballot measure comes where it benefits most or all of our citizens in the city. I'm a strong believer of that. A toy train. Bob, I don't think it's a prudent way to spend our money. Southeast Center, as some people already wrote in the paper, they don't want a pool out there. $70,000 for tables and chairs for the Carnegie Center. I pulled that item out. Those items could be funded through other sources and other vehicles. There's merit for some of the part of Bob, but largely, no. I think we should defeat Bob and come back to the table and say, what programs will benefit all or most of our citizens? And that's where I've seen it in the past, and I want to see it go in the future. Thank you.
Mayor?
I'm always proud to be able to sit here and say I am the mayor of one of the best places in America to live, to work, to play, retire, ride a bike, start a career, go to college, to be safe and to be happy. And that doesn't happen by accident. It happens because of you, the people who live here in Fort Collins. You are the ones who give us your time, your talents, your treasures, and your votes and your voices. You're the ones that tell us this is what will make Fort Collins the community we want it to be. And we do that through your voices being heard at the April 7th election of projects, capital projects. I personally love what we have done for the last 40 years, bringing transit service and buses, a museum of discovery, a Lincoln Center, a senior center, swimming pools, and intersection improvements. We feel this every day, and this is that continuing discussion. Thank you.
I'd like to thank our panelists. They've done a wonderful job tonight, and thank you for your professionalism in the way you've maintained our dialogue. Thank you to our watching audience, our attending audience that braved the snow tonight. Thank you to the City of Fort Collins, and a big thank you to the CrossCurrents team of the League of the Women Voters for Larimer County. Copies of this evening are available on the Larimer County website, or the League of Women Voters website, I believe probably the Larimer County website, and the county libraries and from the city. And you can always go to the League of Women Voters website, which is www.lwv/LarimerCounty.org. Larimercounty.org. Thank you very much, everyone, and please drive safely.